The fluorescent lights of Chicago Public Library's third floor flickered as Chen gathered her tutoring materials, exhaustion pressing against her bones like a physical weight. 23 years old with dark circles permanently etched beneath her eyes, she checked her phone. 4:47 p.m. 13 minutes until her next student arrived, barely enough time to grab the stale coffee from her thermos and review the second-grade reading curriculum she'd been assigned. Her stomach growled, reminding her that the granola bar at noon had been her only meal today. Rent was due in 6 days. Her student loans had entered repayment last month, and the university had just increased tuition for her final semester. The mathematics of poverty were simple and brutal. 3 part-time jobs still weren't enough. Miss Chen, the library coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, appeared at her usual corner table with a manila folder. "I have a new assignment for you. Private tutoring, twice a week, very generous. Rate." Mia's heart leapt despite her practiced cynicism about opportunities that seemed too good. "How generous?" $80 per session. Mrs. Patterson slid the folder across the table, her expression carefully neutral. The father specifically requested someone patient, kind, and excellent with children who've experienced trauma. Your work with the foster care reading program made you the obvious choice. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. $160 per week would change everything. Mia could eat actual meals, maybe even cut back her weekend shifts at the campus bookstore. "What kind of trauma?" she asked carefully. "Professional training overriding desperate need." Mrs. Patterson's voice softened with genuine sympathy. "His mother passed away 8 months ago. He's 7, bright but struggling to focus in school. The father works unconventional hours. Needs someone who can come to their home in Lincoln Park." Lincoln Park meant money, the kind of neighborhood where Mia's ancient Honda Civic looked conspicuously out of place among Tesla SUVs and Mercedes sedans. "When would I start?" "Tonight, if possible. 6 o'clock, Mrs. Patterson pushed a business card across the table, heavy cardstock with raised lettering that screamed wealth. Marco Santoro, private residence. The name triggered something in Mia's memory, a whisper of recognition she couldn't quite place. Chicago was full of Santoros. It was probably nothing. "I'll be there," she confirmed, already mentally calculating gas money and whether her least-worn cardigan was clean enough for a Lincoln Park mansion. The Santoro residence stood behind ornate iron gates, a 3-story limestone mansion that belonged in an architecture magazine rather than occupied by actual humans. Mia pressed the intercom button at exactly 5:58 p.m., her heart hammering against her ribs as security cameras tracked her every movement. Name and purpose? The voice was male, professional, with an edge that suggested this wasn't a typical household staff position. "Mia Chen. I'm here to tutor." She glanced at the paperwork. "Luca Santoro?" The gate swung open silently, revealing a circular driveway where a black Escalade sat beside a vintage Alfa Romeo that probably cost more than her entire college education. Mia's ancient Civic sputtered apologetically as she parked at a respectful distance from the luxury vehicles. The front door opened before she could knock, revealing a stern woman in her 50s whose sharp eyes assessed Mia with the efficiency of airport security. "Miss Chen, I'm Elena, house manager. Mr. Santoro is running late, but Luca is waiting in the study." Her slight Italian accent added weight to each word, turning a simple introduction into something closer to a warning. The interior of the house took Mia's breath away, despite her efforts to appear unfazed. Marble floors reflected light from a crystal chandelier, artwork that looked museum-quality adorned cream-colored walls, and a grand staircase curved upward like something from a period film. The wealth on display should have felt cold, but subtle touches a child's drawing magneted to a hidden kitchen board. Small sneakers tucked beneath an antique console spoke of actual life within the opulence. Elena led her through a maze of hallways, her heels clicking precisely against marble, then hardwood, then thick carpet as they moved deeper into the house. "Luca is a good boy," she said without preamble, her tone softening marginally. "Very smart, very kind. But since his mother..." The sentence trailed off, finished by the weight of shared understanding. The study was smaller than Mia expected, more intimate despite floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and windows overlooking a manicured garden. A small boy sat at an oversized mahogany desk, dark curls falling across his forehead as he focused intensely on building something with Legos. He didn't look up when they entered, his concentration absolute. "Luca, tesoro, your tutor is here," Elena announced gently, her severity melting into obvious affection. The boy's hands stilled, but he didn't turn around immediately. When he finally did, Mia's heart constricted with recognition she felt in her bones. Those eyes, deep brown and achingly sad, belonged to a child who had seen too much, understood loss too intimately. She'd seen that expression before, in her own mirror at age 9, right after her father died. "Hi, Luca. I'm Miss Mia." She kept her voice soft, moving slowly to a chair near his desk rather than towering over him. "What are you building?" "A castle," he replied quietly, his small fingers resuming their careful placement of plastic blocks. "But the towers keep falling down." Mia leaned forward with genuine interest, examining his construction. "That's because you're in tree, building them too tall without enough support at the base. See?" She pointed to the structure's weakness without touching his work. "If we add some reinforcement here and here, the towers will be strong enough to go as high as you want." Something flickered in Luca's eyes, surprise. Maybe that she'd understood both his architectural problem and the deeper metaphor. He studied her face with unsettling intensity for a 7-year-old. "Are you smart?" he asked bluntly. "Smart enough to know that towers need strong foundations," Mia answered honestly. "And that sometimes things fall down, but we can build them back up again, better than before." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before vanishing. "Mama used to say that." The simple statement landed like a physical blow, carrying the weight of a child's grief in 4 small words. Mia swallowed against the tightness in her throat. "Your mama sounds like she was very wise." She was. Luca's attention returned to his Legos, but his posture had relaxed slightly. "Can you help me fix the towers?" They worked together in comfortable silence for 20 minutes, Mia letting Luca lead while offering suggestions that he could accept or reject. She noticed things: how he organized the blocks by color before building, the precise way he aligned each piece, the fleeting smile when a tower finally stood stable. This was a child who craved control in a world that had become unpredictable. "Should we look at your schoolwork?" Mia suggested gently when the castle stood complete, 4 strong towers supporting colorful flags he'd added at the peaks. Luca's shoulders tensed immediately. "I'm not good at reading," he mumbled, the shame in his voice breaking her heart. "The words get all mixed up." "Can I tell you a secret?" Mia leaned in conspiratorially. "I had the same problem when I was your age. The words would jump around on the page like they were playing a game I didn't know the rules to." His head snapped up, hope and skepticism warring across his young face. "Really?" "Really. But then I learned some tricks that helped me catch those sneaky words." She pulled out the reading workbook Elena had provided. "Want to learn the tricks?" For the next 40 minutes, Mia introduced strategies she'd developed through her own childhood struggle, with mild dyslexia, colored overlays to reduce visual stress, finger tracking to maintain focus, breaking words into smaller chunks. Luca absorbed every technique with fierce concentration, his frustration gradually transforming into cautious confidence. The cat sat on the mat. He read slowly but successfully, using the overlay and tracking method. When he finished, he looked up at Mia with an expression of pure wonder. "I did it. You absolutely did." Mia's smile was genuine, pride swelling in her chest at his achievement. "And you know what? You're going to get better and better every time we practice." The study door opened with a soft click, and Mia glanced up, to see a man entering with the kind of presence that immediately commanded attention. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, he moved with a predator's grace that set off instinctive alarms in her hindbrain. Marco Santoro was devastating in a way that transcended conventional handsomeness. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw shadowed with carefully maintained stubble, dark eyes that missed nothing as they swept the room with tactical efficiency. But it was the contradiction that caught her attention, the dangerous edge softening instantly when his gaze landed on his son, Papa. Luca scrambled from his chair, launching himself at his father with the unself-conscious trust of a child who knew he'd be caught. Marco caught him effortlessly, lifting the boy in a hug that revealed powerful arms beneath expensive fabric. "Ciao, Piccolo. How was your lesson?" His voice was deep, carrying a slight accent that suggested Italian roots despite perfect English. "Miss Mia taught me tricks to catch the words." Luca's excitement bubbled over, his earlier shyness evaporating, and she helped me build a castle with strong towers. Those dark eyes shifted to Mia, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. For a long moment, he simply studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. She had the disturbing sense of being catalogued, assessed, her every detail noted and filed away with professional precision. "Miss Chen," he extended his free hand, Luca still balanced on his other arm. "Marco Santoro, thank you for coming on short notice." His handshake was firm, warm, his palm calloused in a way that seemed at odds with the business attire. Mia noticed his knuckles bore the faint scars of someone who'd been in fights, multiple fights. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Santoro. Luca is a wonderful student. Please, call me Marco." He set Luca down gently, his hand lingering on the boy's shoulder in a gesture of unconscious affection. "And he seems to have responded well to you already, which is—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features before control reasserted itself. "Rare lately." Elena appeared in the doorway as if summoned. "Luca, time for dinner. Come help me set the table. But I want to show Papa the castle. Your castle will still be there after dinner, tesoro." Elena interrupted gently but firmly. "Come." Luca glanced between his father and Mia, then nodded reluctantly. "Will you come back?" he asked her, vulnerability naked in his young voice. "Thursday evening, same time," Mia confirmed, her smile warm despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. "And we'll work on more reading tricks, I promise." After Luca followed Elena out, the silence in the study grew heavy with unspoken assessment. Marco moved to the window, his back to Mia, as he appeared to study the darkening garden. "Mrs. Patterson speaks highly of your work with traumatized children," he said quietly. "Said you have a gift for reaching kids others have written off. I don't believe in writing off children, Mr. Santoro. Marco," he corrected, turning to face her. The last rays of sunset caught his profile, highlighting the sharp planes of his face and the slight crease between his brows that suggested he carried constant tension. "Marco," she amended. "Every child deserves someone who believes in them, especially when they're struggling." Something in his expression shifted, a crack in the armor revealing exhaustion that matched her own. Luca's teacher recommended holding him back a year. Said he's not applying himself, that he's disruptive. Anger simmered beneath his controlled tone. She has no idea what he's been through. Mia chose her words carefully, professional training warring with instinctive protectiveness toward the small boy who'd shared his grief so openly. Children process trauma differently than adults. Sometimes what looks like not paying attention is actually a mind overwhelmed by trying to process loss, while also learning multiplication tables. Marco's eyes snapped to hers with sharp focus. "You've worked with bereaved children before?" "I was a bereaved child before," she answered honestly, the truth slipping out before she could calculate whether vulnerability was appropriate. "My father died when I was 9. I know what it feels like when teachers expect you to just get over it and focus on fractions." For a long moment, Marco simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his shoulders dropped almost imperceptibly, tension releasing by a fraction. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly, the formulaic phrase carrying genuine empathy. "It was a long time ago." Mia glanced at the Lego castle, its 4 towers standing strong against the darkening window. "But I remember, and I promise I'll do everything I can to help Luca." The rate Mrs. Patterson quoted $80 per session. "Is that acceptable?" Marco pulled out his wallet, extracting bills with the casual ease of someone for whom money wasn't a constant calculation. "That's more than generous," Mia admitted, trying not to stare at the thick stack of hundreds he carried like most people carried singles. He counted out $300, extending it toward her. "First session and in advance on the next 2. I prefer to pay in cash." The statement was casual, but something in his tone suggested this was a test, though Mia couldn't decipher what she was being tested for. She accepted the money with murmured thanks, tucking it into her worn messenger bag and trying to ignore how the amount represented a week of groceries, her utility bill, and maybe even a splurge on new shoes that didn't have cardboard reinforcing the sole. "There's one more thing," Marco said as she gathered her materials. "Luca doesn't need to know the details of my work. If he mentions what I do, just redirect the conversation." Warning bells chimed faintly in Mia's mind. "What do you do?" "Exactly." His smile was charming but revealed nothing. "Import, export. Very boring. Lots of paperwork and logistics. Nothing a 7-year-old would find interesting. The non-answer raised more questions, but Mia nodded anyway. She needed this job too desperately to probe into her employer's business affairs, even when instinct whispered that import-export was a euphemism for something else entirely. Over the next 3 weeks, Mia fell into a routine that centered around her Tuesday and Thursday evenings at the Santoro mansion. Luca blossomed under her patient attention, his reading improving with each session as her specialized techniques gave him tools to manage his learning differences. More importantly, the sadness in his eyes began lifting, replaced gradually by the natural curiosity and joy that should characterize childhood. They developed their own rituals: 15 minutes of Lego building before academics, a special handshake when he mastered a new reading level, celebratory hot chocolate, made by Elena, when he finished a whole book independently. The castle grew more elaborate each week, gaining a moat, a drawbridge, and tiny Lego knights that Luca positioned with meticulous care. The knights protect the castle, he explained during their 5th session, his small fingers adjusting a guard at the gate, so nothing bad can get inside. Mia recognized the metaphor immediately, a child creating the protection he craved in miniature. "That's good," she said softly. "Everyone needs to feel safe in their castle." Marco's appearances during sessions remained brief but increasingly frequent. He'd arrive home while they worked, always greeting Luca with obvious affection, before retreating to his office. But Mia felt his attention like a physical weight, catching glimpses of him in doorways, his dark eyes tracking her interactions with his son with hawk-like intensity. She tried to ignore the way her pulse quickened when he entered a room, the unwanted awareness of his presence that made her hyper-conscious of every movement. This was her employer, nothing more, and she desperately needed this job. Attraction, if that's even what this unsettling awareness was, had no place in their professional relationship. But sometimes, when Marco watched her helping Luca sound out difficult words, she caught something in his expression that looked almost like longing. Not attraction, precisely, but something deeper, perhaps grief for the partnership and parenting he'd lost, or gratitude that someone else could reach his son in ways he couldn't. On a Thursday evening in early November, Mia arrived to find the mansion in subtle disarray. Elena's usual warm greeting was clipped, tension radiating from her rigid posture. Male voices murmured behind closed doors more than usual, their tones urgent rather than conversational. "Is everything all right?" Mia asked as Elena led her upstairs to Luca's bedroom instead of the usual study. "Mr. Santoro had unexpected business," Elena replied, her accent thickening with stress. "He asks that you keep Luca upstairs tonight, yes? Perhaps some quiet reading in his room?" The request was strange enough to trigger Mia's instincts, but she nodded. Luca sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, surrounded by books, his expression more withdrawn than she'd seen in weeks. "Hey, buddy." Mia settled beside him on the plush carpet. "Your dad had to work late, so we're having a special bedroom session tonight. Want to show me your favorite books?" Luca pointed to a shelf without enthusiasm, his earlier progress seeming to evaporate in the face of whatever tension permeated the house. "Are you going to leave like Mama did?" he asked suddenly, his voice small and terrified. The question pierced her heart like a blade. "Oh, Luca. No, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere." A loud crash from downstairs made them both jump, followed by raised voices that carried through the floors despite obvious attempts at volume control. Luca's face went pale, his small body trembling as he scrambled into Mia's lap with the instinct of a frightened child seeking shelter. She wrapped her arms around him automatically, her own heart racing as she strained to decipher the commotion below. This wasn't normal business affairs. This was something else entirely, something dangerous that made every maternal instinct in her body scream to protect the child in her arms. "It's okay," she murmured, even as her mind raced through possibilities. "Your papa is handling some grown-up business, that's all. How about we read your favorite story really loud, so we don't hear the boring work talk?" Luca nodded against her shoulder, his grip on her shirt tight enough to wrinkle the fabric. She reached for the nearest book, Where the Wild Things Are, and began reading with exaggerated animation, using different voices for each monster to distract him from the tension vibrating through the floorboards. By the time she reached the end, where Max returns home to find his supper waiting, still hot, the voices downstairs had silenced. Luca's breathing had evened out, his small body relaxing incrementally as the story's familiar comfort worked its magic. A soft knock preceded the bedroom door opening. Marco stood in the threshold, his suit jacket gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked with more of those telling scars. His expression was carefully controlled, but Mia caught the flash of something raw beneath the surface anger. Maybe, or fear. "Papa!" Luca scrambled from Mia's lap, launching himself at his father with the force of relief. Marco caught him, burying his face in his son's dark curls for a long moment before meeting Mia's eyes over the boy's head. "Thank you," he mouthed silently, the words carrying weight beyond simple gratitude. After that tense Thursday evening, Marco insisted on having his driver take Mia home, a black Mercedes with tinted windows and a silent man whose build suggested security rather than simple chauffeur duties. She tried to protest, citing her perfectly functional Honda, but Marco's expression brooked no argument. "It's late, and your car made a concerning noise when you arrived," he said, his tone leaving no room for debate. "Dimitri will ensure you get home safely." The concerning noise was her car's normal death rattle, but Mia found herself accepting the ride with a mixture of gratitude and unease. As the Mercedes glided through Chicago's nighttime streets with supernatural smoothness, she caught Dimitri's eyes in the rearview mirror, assessing, calculating, the look of someone trained to identify threats. Her cramped studio apartment in Rogers Park felt even smaller after spending hours in the Santoro mansion. Mia dumped her messenger bag on the second-hand futon that served as both couch and bed, pulling out the $200 Marco had pressed into her hand as she left double the usual rate, offered with a quiet, "For your patience during a difficult evening. She should feel grateful." The money meant she could actually buy protein this week instead of surviving on ramen and peanut butter. But something about the entire situation gnawed at her instincts, the pieces not quite fitting the picture of a simple, import-export businessman. Mia opened her laptop, hesitating only briefly before typing Marco Santoro Chicago into the search bar. The results made her blood run cold. Santoro family transitions leadership. After Vincent Santoro's death, Marco Santoro takes control of Chicago's North Side operations. Federal investigation into Santoro organization stalls despite witness testimony. The articles were careful, using terms like alleged and suspected, dancing around direct accusations with the precision of journalists who understood libel laws. But the why implications were crystal clear. Marco Santoro wasn't just a businessman. He was the head of one of Chicago's most powerful organized crime families. And she'd been spending 2 evenings a week alone with his son, completely oblivious to the danger potentially surrounding them. Mia's hands trembled as she scrolled through article after article, piecing together a story of generational power, strategic violence, and a man who'd inherited an empire at 28 when his father died under suspicious circumstances. There were photos Marco at charity galas in perfect tuxedos, Marco leaving federal court with expensive lawyers flanking him, Marco at his wife's funeral, his face a mask of grief, while Luca clung to his leg. Sofia Santoro, née Romano, had died in a car accident 8 months ago. Single-vehicle collision, lost control on Lakeshore Drive during a rainstorm. The official report called it tragic but accidental. 3 articles buried deeper in her search suggested otherwise, hinting at brake line tampering and rival family involvement, though no charges were ever filed. Mia closed her laptop with shaking hands, her mind racing through implications. Luca's mother hadn't just died, she'd likely been murdered. And Marco's unexpected business tonight had probably involved the kind of meetings where voices got raised and things got broken because the stakes involved were life and death. She should quit. Every logical bone in her body screamed to walk away from this situation before she got pulled deeper into a world that destroyed people. She'd email Mrs. Patterson tomorrow, citing schedule conflicts or family obligations, any excuse that let her extract herself cleanly. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was Luca's face, the way he'd trembled in her arms, the trust in his eyes when he asked if she was going to leave like his mama did, the pride in his smile when he successfully read a difficult passage. That little boy had lost his mother to violence. He was struggling in school, drowning in grief, failed by teachers who saw his trauma as inconvenience. And somehow, against all odds, he'd connected with Mia in a way that was actually helping him heal. Could she really abandon him just because his father was dangerous? Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams filled with conflicting images. Luca's innocent smile and Marco's calculating eyes, the warmth of the Santoro mansion, and the cold reality of what business was actually conducted within those elegant walls. Tuesday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth, Chicago's weather offering one last gasp of autumn before winter's inevitable assault. Mia drove her protesting Honda to Lincoln Park, her decision made despite every survival instinct screaming warnings. She would continue tutoring Luca, but she'd be more careful, more aware, maintaining professional boundaries that would keep her safely peripheral to whatever dangerous world Marco inhabited. Elena greeted her, with unusual warmth, actually smiling as she led Mia toward the study. "Mr. Santoro would like to speak with you before the session, if you have a moment." Her carefully constructed boundaries dissolved immediately into anxiety. Had he somehow learned she'd been researching him? Was this the polite prelude to dismissal, or something worse? Marco stood at the study window, his back to the door, shoulders tight with tension despite his casual attire, dark jeans, and a black Henley that emphasized his powerful build. When he turned, his expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes held the same exhaustion she'd seen reflected in her own mirror. "Miss Chen, thank you for coming." He gestured to one of the leather chairs. "Please, sit. Can I offer you something to drink?" "I'm fine, thank you." Mia perched on the edge of the chair, her messenger bag clutched like a shield. "Is everything all right with Luca?" "Luca is." Marco paused, choosing words with visible care. "He's been different, since you started working with him. Lighter somehow. He actually wants to go to school now. Talks about showing his teacher the reading strategies you've taught him." His voice carried wonder mixed with something that might have been grief. "I haven't seen him this engaged with life since before Sophia died." The use of his late wife's name created intimacy Mia hadn't anticipated. "He's a remarkable kid," she said honestly. "He just needed someone who understood that his struggles weren't about intelligence or effort." "You've given him something I couldn't." Marco moved to lean against the desk, close enough that Mia caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else, gunpowder, maybe, though that could have been her imagination coloring everything with her new knowledge. Hope. The belief that he can overcome what's holding him back. Mia met his eyes, seeing past the dangerous reputation to the exhausted father beneath. "You've given him everything that matters, Mr. Santoro Marco. Love, security, protection. Sometimes kids just need an outside perspective to help them see their own strength." About that, Marco's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Last Thursday, you saw more of my business than I'd intended. I need to know if that's going to be a problem." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment to claim ignorance, to pretend she thought business meant nothing more than a heated negotiation with difficult clients. Instead, honesty won out over self-preservation. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "What you are?" "I looked you up after I got home." Marco's jaw tightened, every line of his body shifting into a stillness that felt predatory. "And yet you came back." "I came back for Luca," Mia clarified. Though even as she said it, she knew the truth was more complicated. "He's been through hell, and he's finally starting to heal. I won't abandon him just because his father's business interests are unconventional." A sound that might have been a laugh escaped Marco's throat. "Unconventional. That's diplomatic." He studied her face with that unnerving intensity. "You're not afraid of me." It wasn't a question, but Mia answered anyway. "Should I be? Most people are." He pushed away from the desk, moving closer but stopping just outside her personal space, as if testing boundaries. "They see the reputation, the rumors, and they cross the street to avoid me. You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Chen. Or maybe I'm just someone who knows the difference between a man who hurts children and a man who loves his son desperately enough to hire a broke college student to help him read." The words came out stronger than she felt, but she held his gaze. "I know what you do, Marco. I'm not naive. But I also see how you are with Luca, and that tells me more about who you actually are than any newspaper article." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, or a vulnerability quickly shuddered. "You should be careful about making assumptions based on limited information." "Then tell me I'm wrong." Mia stood, closing some of the distance between them, with a courage born from exhaustion and desperation. "Tell me you're the monster the papers suggest, and I'll walk out that door right now." The silence stretched between them, heavy with challenge and something electric that made Mia's skin prickle with awareness. Marco's dark eyes held hers, and she saw the war playing out behind them, calculation versus honesty, protection versus connection. "I can't tell you that," he said finally, his voice rough, "because you're not wrong, but you're not entirely right either. I'm not a good man, Mia. I've done things that would horrify you, made choices that would keep you awake at night, but everything I do, everything I am, is in service of protecting what's mine. And Luca is everything. The use of her first name sent heat through her chest that had nothing to do with fear. Then we understand each other, she managed, proud that her voice remained steady. I'm here for Luca. Whatever else happens in this house, whatever business you conduct, that's between you and your conscience. My only concern is helping that little boy thrive. Marco's hand rose slowly, giving her time to step back, before his fingers brushed her cheek with unexpected gentleness. You're remarkable, you know that? Most people in your position would run. You choose to stay, to protect my son from his own father's reputation. His thumb traced her cheekbone briefly before he dropped his hand, stepping back as if burned. That kind of courage is rare. Before Mia could respond, though she had no idea what she would have said, the study door burst open and Luca barreled in, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Miss Mia, I got an A on my reading test. Mrs. Morrison said my improvement was remarkable. His joy was incandescent, transforming his small face into pure sunshine as he waved a paper covered in encouraging comments and a large red A. The moment between the adults dissolved as Mia crouched to examine his test, her professional mask sliding back into place. Luca, this is incredible. Look at all these difficult words you mastered. She felt rather than saw Marco's withdrawal, creating appropriate distance as he watched their interaction with an expression she couldn't decipher. When she glanced up, she caught something raw and unguarded, flickering across his features before his control reasserted itself. I'm very proud of you, Piccolo, Marco said, ruffling his son's hair with obvious affection. This deserves a celebration. What would you like for dinner? Pizza. And Miss Mia has to stay. Luca grabbed her hand with the unconscious presumption of a child who decided she belonged in his life. Please? Elena makes the best pizza, and we can eat in the garden, even though it's cold. Mia opened her mouth to decline. To maintain those professional boundaries she'd promised herself. But Marco's eyes met hers over his son's head, with an expression that looked like hope mixed with resignation, as if he expected rejection but couldn't quite suppress wanting her to stay. I don't want to impose, she started. You're not imposing, Marco interrupted quietly. You're giving my son something to celebrate beyond just a good grade. You're giving him normalcy. That's worth more than you know. 20 minutes later, Mia found herself in the Santoro mansion's garden, wrapped in a cashmere throw blanket that probably cost more than her monthly rent, watching Luca bounce excitedly around the outdoor furniture, while Elena prepared pizza in the chef's kitchen that opened onto the patio. String lights twinkled overhead, transforming the November evening into something magical. Marco emerged with wine for the adults and sparkling cider for Luca, his movements efficient but his expression softer than she'd seen before. To reading tricks and strong towers, Marco toasted, his eyes finding Mia's across the flickering candlelight between them. And to castles that keep us safe, Luca added, lifting his plastic cup with the solemnity of a much older person. They clinked glasses, and in that moment, wrapped in unexpected warmth despite the autumn chill, Mia felt the dangerous shift happening inside her chest. This wasn't just about tutoring anymore. Somewhere between reading lessons and Lego castles, she'd started to care about these people, both of them in ways that had nothing to do with professional obligation. As Elena served pizza and Luca chattered about his school day, Mia caught Marco watching her with an intensity that made her skin flush. Not the calculating assessment of their earlier encounters, but something warmer, more complicated, equally dangerous in its own way. She was falling into something she didn't understand, crossing lines she'd promised herself she'd maintain, and the terrifying part was how little she wanted to stop. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of sessions that increasingly blurred professional and personal boundaries. Marco started joining their lessons more frequently, ostensibly to observe Luca's progress but lingering afterward for conversations that ranged from education theory to Italian literature to the cub's perpetual disappointments. Mia learned that Marco had studied literature at Northwestern before his father's death pulled him into the family business. He quoted Dante with the ease of someone who'd found solace in poetry, and his insights into character motivation revealed a mind far more complex than the blunt instrument his reputation suggested. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. She told him about her own father, an English teacher who died suddenly of an aneurysm, leaving her mother to raise Mia and her younger sister alone on a teacher's pension. How she'd chosen education as her major to honor his memory, to be for other children what he'd been for her. We're both living for the dead in our own ways. Marco observed one evening after Luca had gone to bed and she'd stayed for coffee that turned into hours of conversation. Trying to honor what they gave us by becoming who they needed us to be. The insight struck deeper than Mia expected. Is that what you think you're doing? Becoming who your father needed? Marco's laugh held no humor. My father needed a soldier, someone willing to do violence without hesitation to protect what was his. I became that man because I had no choice. His hands wrapped around his espresso cup. But Sophia made me want to be something different. And now Luca needs a father who can give him a normal life, not a legacy of blood and fear. You're changing things, Mia said, the observation based on careful attention to details she'd been piecing together. The charity work, the legitimate business acquisitions, the distance you maintain from traditional operations. You're trying to transform what you inherited. His eyes snapped to hers, sharp and assessing. You're more observant than I realized. I pay attention. She met his gaze steadily. It's what good teachers do, and what I see is a man trying to build something better for his son, even if the foundation he started with was built on violence. Marco set down his cup with controlled precision. The foundation doesn't change just because you want it to. There are expectations, obligations, people who depend on the way things have always been done. Change threatens that structure, makes me vulnerable to challenges from those who prefer the old ways. Is that what Thursday was about? Mia asked carefully, remembering the raised voices and broken objects. Someone challenging your changes? His jaw tightened. My father's generation believes strength comes only through fear. They don't understand that true power lies in loyalty earned, not obedience forced. He paused, seeming to wage an internal battle before continuing. The Rossi family wants to test that theory. They think my efforts to legitimize our operations make me weak, a target they can exploit to expand their territory. The casual admission of criminal warfare should have terrified her. Instead, Mia felt a surge of protectiveness for the man in front of her, dangerous, flawed, but genuinely trying to be better than his circumstances demanded. What are you going to do? She asked. What I have to. Marco's eyes held regret alongside determination. Protect what's mine. Show them that choosing legitimacy doesn't mean surrendering strength. His hand reached across the table, covering hers with warmth and surprising gentleness. But this is why I need you to be careful, Mia. The more time you spend here, the more associated with us you become. And in my world, that association makes you a potential target. Her breath caught at the implication. Are you asking me to stop coming? No. The word came out rough, almost anguished. God help me, no. Luca needs you. And I... He stopped himself, withdrawing his hand as if the contact burned. You've become important to this family, to both of us. That makes you someone I need to protect. The confession hung between them, carrying implications neither seemed ready to explore directly. Mia's heart hammered as she processed what he wasn't quite saying, that somewhere between reading lessons and late-night conversations, they'd become something more complicated than employer and employee. I'm not afraid, she said, echoing her earlier declaration with newfound conviction. Not of you, and not of whatever complications come from being part of Luca's life. Marco's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt or hesitation, and apparently finding none. You should be, he murmured. Fear is what keeps people alive in my world. Then maybe I don't belong in your world. Mia leaned forward, closing the distance between them with a courage born from connection she was finally admitting to herself. Maybe I belong in Luca's world, which just happens to overlap with yours. And maybe that's exactly what both of you need, someone who refuses to be afraid, who sees you as more than your reputation or your father's legacy. The words landed like a declaration, transforming the air between them from possibility to inevitability. Marco's hand rose to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with reverent gentleness that contradicted every dangerous rumor she'd read about him. Mia, he breathed, her name a warning and a plea simultaneously. She should pull away, should maintain the boundaries she'd promised herself. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes drifting closed for just a moment, as she let herself feel the warmth of connection she'd denied herself for so long. The sharp buzz of Marco's phone shattered the moment. He pulled away with a muttered curse, his expression hardening as he read the incoming message. I have to deal with this, he said, regret and frustration evident in every line of his body. Dimitri will take you home. Marco, I can drive myself. Please. The single word carried weight beyond simple request. Let me do this one thing to keep you safe. It's all I can offer right now. Mia nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind his insistence. In his world, protection was love's most tangible expression, the one gift he knew how to give without reservation. As Dimitri drove her home through Chicago's glittering nighttime streets, Mia pressed her fingers to her cheek, still feeling the ghost of Marco's touch. She was falling for him for both of them, and the terrifying part was how right it felt despite all the reasons it should feel wrong. The next Thursday, Mia arrived to find the mansion in lockdown. Armed security that usually remained discreetly invisible now stood openly at strategic points, their presence transforming the elegant home into a fortress. Elena's face was pale but composed as she greeted Mia at the door. Mr. Santoro asks that you and Luca stay in the third-floor playroom tonight, she said without preamble. There's been a situation. He'll explain when he can. Alarm bells clanged in Mia's mind. Is Luca safe? With you, yes. Come. The third-floor playroom turned out to be a child's paradise. Video game systems, art supplies, books lining floor-to-ceiling shelves, and a complex Lego city that dwarfed Luca's study castle. But the boy sat in the corner, knees pulled to his chest, his earlier progress evaporating in the face of palpable danger. Hey, buddy. Mia settled beside him on the plush carpet, not touching but offering presence. Want to tell me what's going on? Men came to the house, Luca whispered, his voice small and terrified. Papa sent me up, here with Dimitri, and said not to come out until he came to get me. But I heard shouting, Miss Mia, loud shouting like the night mama. He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Ice flooded Mia's veins. Whatever was happening downstairs involved the kind of threat that had taken Sophia's life. And Marco was down there, facing it while his son trembled in fear. Your papa is very strong, Mia said, pulling Luca into her arms with fierce protectiveness. And he has lots of people protecting him. Nothing is going to happen to him, okay? He's going to come up here when everything is settled, and we're going to all be fine. She spoke the words with more conviction than she felt, praying they were true even as her mind raced through terrifying possibilities. Below them, the man she was falling for faced unknown dangers while she sat helpless, unable to do anything except shield his son from knowledge of threats she didn't fully understand. 20 minutes passed like 20 hours. Mia kept Luca engaged with a complicated Lego project, her ears straining for sounds that never came, the house's thick walls and floors containing whatever confrontation was occurring. When the playroom door finally opened, Marco stood in the threshold, his shirt torn at the shoulder and a cut above his eyebrow bleeding sluggishly. But he was alive, whole, his eyes finding his son immediately with visible relief. Papa! Luca launched himself across the room, and Marco caught him, lifting him despite the obvious pain the movement caused. I'm okay, Piccolo. Everything is okay now. Marco's voice was steady despite the tremor in his hands as he held his son. His eyes found Mia's over Luca's head, and the gratitude and something deeper fear, maybe, at how close he'd come to leaving his son orphaned, made her throat tighten. Dimitri, take Luca to Elena. Get him some ice cream and his favorite movie. Marco set his son down gently despite Luca's protests. I need to speak with Miss Mia for a moment. After a brief argument, Luca reluctantly left with the bodyguard, glancing back multiple times as if afraid his father might disappear. When they were alone, Marco's controlled facade crumbled slightly, exhaustion and pain breaking through. Let me look at that, Mia said, moving to examine the cut on his forehead with the basic first aid skills every teacher learned. You need stitches. I've had worse. But he didn't pull away when her fingers gently probed the wound, his eyes closing briefly at her touch. The Rosses sent representatives to discuss terms. The discussion got heated. Heated enough to attack you in your own home? Anger surprised her with its intensity. With your son upstairs? They wanted to send a message about respecting boundaries. Marco's jaw clenched. They delivered it. Now I have to send my own response. Mia grabbed his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Marco Santoro, you listen to me. Whatever response you send, whatever message you deliver, you make damn sure it doesn't leave Luca without a father. Because that little boy has lost enough. And he needs you alive more than he needs you to win some territorial pissing contest. Surprise flickered across his features at her vehemence, followed by something that looked like wonder. You're giving me orders now? Someone has to. She released him, stepping back before the proximity could muddle her message. You said you were trying to build something different, something better. Prove it. Find a way to protect what's yours without sacrificing everything in the process. Marco caught her wrist, pulling her back gently but inexorably. And what if I can't? What if the only language these men understand is violence and fear? Then be smarter than them, Mia challenged. Use that brilliant mind you hide behind the tough guy reputation. Find a solution that doesn't end with Luca standing at another funeral. His other hand rose to play. Cup her face, his touch reverent despite the blood on his knuckles. When did you become so essential to us? The question was rhetorical, wonder and resignation mixing in his tone. How did a broke college student who answered a tutoring ad become the person whose opinion matters more than all my advisors combined? Maybe because I'm the only one who sees you as more than your position, Mia whispered, leaning into his touch despite every self-preservation instinct screaming warnings. I see Marco the father, Marco the man trying to change his legacy. Not just Marco Santoro, crime boss. His forehead dropped to rest against hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. You make me want to be that man fully, he confessed roughly. Not just for Luca, but for you. For the possibility of something I didn't think I deserved. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and dangerous and impossibly tempting. Mia's hands rested on his chest, feeling his heartbeat hammering, beneath her palms, as rapid and unsteady as her own. Then be that man, she breathed. Not someday, not eventually. Starting now, starting with how you handle the Rossis. Show me that you can protect your family without becoming the monster everyone expects. Marco's lips brushed her forehead, a gesture of affection too tender for a man of his reputation. You ask the impossible. I'm asking for what Luca deserves, what you deserve. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. And what I need if I'm going to stay in your lives as more than just a tutor. The unspoken implication crystallized between them. She was offering something beyond professional boundaries, a possibility neither had dared voice directly. Marco's eyes darkened with understanding and desire, and fear of losing what he'd unexpectedly found. Stay, he said simply, the word carrying depths of meaning. Tonight, tomorrow, for as long as you're willing. Not just for Luca, though God knows he needs you. Stay because I need you, Mia. Your strength, your clarity, your absolute refusal to let me settle for being less than I could be. It was a confession and a plea and a promise all wrapped in a single request. Mia knew she should hesitate, should consider the implications and consequences. Instead, she found herself nodding, stepping fully into whatever they were becoming. Okay, she whispered, I'll stay. The decision to stay changed everything and nothing simultaneously. Mia continued her Tuesday and Thursday sessions with Luca, but now she often remained for dinner, then conversation that stretched into late evening. Marco's driver became a fixture in her life, appearing at her apartment to transport her safely to and from the mansion, a protection she'd stopped protesting. Elena prepared a guest room for the nights Mia stayed late, though she never actually slept there, instead finding herself in Marco's study until dawn, talking about everything from philosophy to Luca's, progressed to the careful dismantling of his father's criminal empire. I've diverted 80% of our operations into legitimate channels, Marco explained one December evening, spreadsheets and acquisition documents spread across his desk. Restaurants, real estate development, import, export that actually involves legal goods. But the remaining 20%. He rubbed his face wearily. That's where the resistance lives. Men who've profited from drugs and protection rackets their entire careers don't transition easily into board meetings and quarterly reports. Mia studied the documents with her analytical teacher's mind, seeing patterns in the numbers. The Rossis are part of that 20%? They're the biggest obstacle. Marco's jaw tightened with frustration. They see my transition as weakness, an opportunity to absorb territory my father spent decades securing. If I show vulnerability, if I fail to respond to their provocations with sufficient force, others will follow their lead. The whole structure could collapse. Or, Mia suggested carefully, you could use their aggression against them. Let them overstep so badly that even the old guard sees them as the destabilizing force, not you. His eyes sharpened with interest. You're suggesting I let them attack? I'm suggesting you be strategic instead of reactive. She pulled one of his documents closer, pointing to a property acquisition. This warehouse complex, you purchased it from a Rossi subsidiary 3 months ago. What if their message to you was actually about reclaiming lost territory? What if you offered it back as a gesture of good faith, but with conditions that expose their continuing criminal operations while demonstrating your commitment to legitimacy? Marco stared at her, something like awe crossing his features. You want me to give them enough rope to hang themselves? I want you to prove that intelligence wins over brute force. Mia met his gaze steadily. Use the law, use public perception. Use every advantage you have that doesn't require Luca to grow up fearing he'll lose another parent. The strategy session lasted until 3 a.m, Marco's initial skepticism transforming into genuine consideration as they mapped out scenarios. When exhaustion finally claimed them, Mia found herself on the leather sofa in his study, wrapped in a cashmere throw, while Marco worked at his desk, a comfortable domesticity that felt dangerously permanent. She woke to find him gone, but a note in his precise handwriting waited on the coffee table. You're brilliant and beautiful, and you make me believe impossible things. Thank you. The confession, rendered in ink on expensive stationery, felt more intimate than any spoken words. Mia pressed the paper to her chest, her heart racing with feelings she was finally ready to name. She was in love with Marco Santoro, completely, impossibly, irrevocably in love with a man whose world should terrify her but instead felt like home. Luca's progress accelerated as winter deepened. His reading scores climbed from below grade level to advanced, his confidence transforming him from a withdrawn, grieving child into a bright, curious boy who volunteered answers in class and made friends at recess. His teacher, Mrs. Morrison, called Marco personally to express her amazement at the transformation. Whatever you're doing, Mr. Santoro, keep doing it, she'd said, according to Marco's recounting. Luca is like a different child. That's all you, Marco told Mia that evening, Luca asleep upstairs after an exhausting day at school. They sat in the garden despite the December chill, wrapped in blankets with brandy warming them from within. You gave him back his future. We gave it to him, Mia corrected. Your love, Elena's stability, the security you provide. I'm just one piece of his support system. Marco's hand found hers beneath the blanket, his fingers intertwining with a naturalness that made her breath catch. You're the piece that made all the other pieces matter again. Before you, he was just going through motions, surviving. You taught him how to thrive. The compliment settled warm in her chest, but Mia saw the shadow behind his eyes. What's wrong? He hesitated, the careful calculation of a man weighing how much truth to share. Finally, he sighed, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. The Rossis rejected my offer. Called it an insult, accused me of trying to trap them with legal complications. His jaw clenched. They're escalating instead of backing down. My sources say they're planning something big, something designed to force me back into old patterns or destroy me completely. Fear iced Mia's veins. What kind of something? I don't know yet. The admission clearly cost him. A man accustomed to controlling information suddenly vulnerable to unknown threats. But they know attacking me directly didn't work. Which means they'll go after Luca. Mia completed the thought he couldn't voice, horror and fury battling in her chest. They'll threaten your son to force your hand. Marco's eyes closed in anguish. I've tripled security, vetted every person who comes near this property, created contingency plans for every scenario I can imagine. But I can't lock him away forever, Mia. He's 7. He needs school, friends, a life beyond these walls. Then we need to end this. Mia's voice came out harder than intended, crystallized by protectiveness for the little boy sleeping peacefully upstairs. Not with half measures or strategic retreats. We need to eliminate the Rossi threat completely. The use of we didn't escape Marco's notice. His eyes opened, finding hers in the garden's soft lighting. This isn't your fight. The hell it isn't. Mia squeezed his hand fiercely. That little boy up there is mine now, Marco. Maybe not legally, maybe not biologically, but in every way that matters. Anyone who threatens him threatens me. So, yes, this is absolutely my fight. Something raw and powerful flickered across Marco's face, gratitude, desire, and something that looked like love, struggling against the fear of voicing it. You're extraordinary, he murmured, pulling her closer until she was pressed against his side, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. And terrifying, and completely essential, they sat in silence, drawing strength from each other's presence. While inside the mansion, Luca dreamed peacefully. Protected by love he didn't yet understand, had expanded to include the woman who'd walked into his life promising to teach him reading tricks. The attack came 2 weeks before Christmas, striking with the precision of careful planning. Luca's school announced a winter concert, a celebration where proud parents would film their children singing carols and displaying art projects. Normal, innocent, the kind of childhood milestone Marco desperately wanted his son to experience. Security protocols were established. Dimitri would shadow Luca throughout the event. 3 additional guards would position themselves strategically around the school gymnasium. Marco would stay visible and armed in case his presence alone deterred threats. Mia insisted on attending despite Marco's concerns, refusing to miss Luca's first public performance since his mother's death. The gymnasium buzzed with excited children and proud parents, the air thick with the scent of sugar cookies and pine garland. Luca stood with his second-grade class, wearing a red sweater Elena had fussed over that morning, his eyes scanning the crowd until he spotted them, Marco standing tall and protective, Mia beside him, waving with an encouraging smile. His face lit up with pure joy, the kind of uncomplicated happiness that had been absent for so long. He waved back enthusiastically, mouthing, "Watch me," with the confidence of a child who knew he was loved. The first 3 songs went perfectly, Luca's clear voice rising above his classmates as he performed with endearing enthusiasm. Mia felt tears prickling her eyes, overwhelmed by how far he'd come, how much healing had occurred in the months since that first tentative session. Marco's hand found hers, squeezing gently. When she glanced at him, his expression held the same emotional overwhelm a father watching his son reclaim childhood joy, thought permanently lost. The fire alarm shattered the moment. The piercing sound sent the organized concert into immediate chaos. Children crying, parents shouting, teachers attempting to maintain order as they herded students toward emergency exits. Marco's entire body went rigid, his hand tightening on Mia's with bruising force as his other hand moved to the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. "It's them," he said, his voice deadly calm despite the fear in his eyes. "Get to Luca. Now." Mia didn't hesitate, pushing through the panicking crowd toward the stage where Luca stood frozen, his eyes wide with terror as he searched for his father. She reached him just as Dimitri appeared from the other direction, the bodyguard's hand already on his weapon. "I've got him," Mia shouted over the alarm, pulling Luca into her arms. The boy clung to her, trembling, his face buried against her shoulder. "East exit is compromised," Dimitri reported into his radio, his eyes constantly scanning for threats, moving principal and asset to secondary location. The carefully rehearsed emergency protocols activated seamlessly. Dimitri led them through the backstage area, away from the main exits where crowds would provide cover for attacks. Mia followed, one arm wrapped protectively around Luca, while her other hand gripped her phone, Marco's number already pulled up. They emerged into a service hallway, cold December air rushing through an emergency exit propped open by a fire extinguisher. Wrong. Everything about this screamed wrong. Protocol dictated those doors remain locked from the outside. "Back!" Dimitri shouted, pushing them behind him as 3 men emerged from the shadows, their weapons raised with professional efficiency. The first gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Dimitri returned fire, his body shielding them as he drove the attackers back. "Go!" he roared at Mia. "Stairwell, second door, lock it behind you." Mia ran, Luca's weight awkward in her arms but adrenaline lending her strength. Behind them, gunfire continued, the sounds echoing through the hallway like violent punctuation. She found the stairwell, crashed through the door, and secured it with shaking hands. "Miss Mia, I'm scared," Luca whimpered, his small body shaking uncontrollably. "I know, baby, I know." Mia pulled out her phone, calling Marco with fingers that trembled so badly, she nearly dropped it. "We're in the north stairwell. Second floor. Dimitri's engaging multiple hostiles. Stay there, lock the door, I'm coming." Marco's voice was sharp with command and barely controlled terror. The line went dead. Seconds stretched into eternities. Mia positioned herself between Luca and the door, her body a shield against whatever might come through. She had no weapon, no training beyond basic self-defense, nothing except fierce determination that no one would reach this child while she still breathed. The doorknob rattled. Mia's heart stopped, her arms tightening around Luca as she prepared to fight with everything she had. Then Marco's voice, tight with urgency. "Mia, it's me. Open up." She scrambled to unlock it, nearly sobbing with relief as Marco burst through, blood on his shirt though she couldn't tell if it was his. Behind him, 2 of his men secured the hallway, their weapons drawn. "Papa." Luca launched himself at his father, and Marco caught him, one arm cradling his son, while his other hand reached for Mia, pulling her into their embrace. "You're both okay?" Marco breathed against her hair, the statement a prayer and confirmation simultaneously. "Thank God, you're both okay." "Dimitri?" Mia asked, though she feared the answer. "Alive. Wounded but stable." Marco pulled back enough to meet her eyes, his gaze fierce with emotion she recognized because she felt it too, the terror of almost losing something precious. "We need to move. My car's out front with a full security detail. We're going somewhere safe until I handle this." The somewhere safe turned out to be a property Mia hadn't known existed, a fortified estate, 90 minutes north of Chicago, surrounded by woods and monitored by sophisticated security systems that made the mansion look vulnerable by comparison. Marco carried an exhausted Luca inside while his men swept the property, their efficiency speaking to rehearsed emergency protocols. Elena waited inside, having been evacuated separately, her eyes wet with tears when she saw them all safe. "Grazie Dio," she whispered, crossing herself before pulling Luca into a grandmother's fierce embrace. While Elena settled Luca in an upstairs bedroom, Marco led Mia to a study that resembled a military command center, monitors displaying security feeds, encrypted phones on the desk, weapons secured in a cabinet that required both biometric and code access. "This is where you plan wars," Mia observed, the reality of his world suddenly stark and undeniable. "This is where I protect what's mine," Marco corrected, pouring them both whiskey with hands that shook slightly despite his controlled exterior. "And today, I almost failed. They got close enough to touch him, Mia." Another 30 seconds. "If Dimitri hadn't been there, if you hadn't moved so fast." He couldn't finish the sentence, anguish breaking through his armor. Mia took the glass he offered, the liquor burning down her throat, but not touching the ice in her veins. "But we were there. We moved fast. Luca is safe because you prepared for this, because your people did their jobs." She set down the glass, moving into his space with deliberate intent. "Now you finish it, Marco. Whatever you have to do, whoever you have to become, you end the Rossi threat tonight." His eyes searched hers, looking for judgment or fear, and finding only fierce determination. "You understand what that means? What I'll have to do? I understand that some people only speak one language, and you're fluent in it when necessary." Mia cupped his face between her hands, forcing him to see the acceptance in her eyes. "I'm not naive about who you are, Marco. I love you anyway because of who you are, not despite it. You're a father who would burn the world to keep his son safe. That's not a monster. That's a man I trust completely." The confession, those 3 words she'd been holding back, landed between them with the force of revelation. Marco's eyes widened, his breath catching as if he'd been struck. "Say that again," he demanded hoarsely. "I love you." Mia smiled despite the tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Marco Santoro. I love your brilliant mind, and your terrible jokes and the way you look at Luca like he's your entire world. I love how hard you're trying to be better than you were raised to be. I love—" His mouth cut off the words, kissing her with desperate intensity that spoke of fear and relief, and emotions too large for language. Mia kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring everything she felt into the connection. All the terror of almost losing him, all the love she'd been denying, all the fierce commitment to his family that had become hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said roughly. "God help me. I love you more than I thought possible. You walked into our lives as a tutor and became the foundation holding us together. You gave Luca hope and gave me a reason to keep fighting for something better." "Then fight," Mia whispered. "End this tonight so we can start building the life we deserve. All 3 of us." Marco kissed her once more, gently this time, a promise sealed in contact. Then he stepped back, his expression hardening into the dangerous man his reputation suggested. "Stay with Luca. Elena will keep you safe. I'll call when it's finished. Marco, I will come back." He caught her hand, pressing it to his lips. I have too much to live for now to be reckless. Trust me. Mia nodded, watching him arm himself with practiced efficiency. When he left the study, surrounded by his men, she saw both sides of him, clearly the loving father and the ruthless boss, two aspects of the same complicated man she'd fallen hopelessly in love with. The hours that followed stretched endlessly. Mia sat with Luca in his temporary bedroom, reading story after story until exhaustion finally claimed him. His small hand remained fisted in her shirt even in sleep, unwilling to let her go, terrified she might disappear like his mother had. Elena brought tea at midnight, settling in a chair by the door like a grandmother standing guard. He will succeed, she said with absolute confidence. Mr. Marco fights like a man possessed when his family is threatened. The Rossis made a mistake attacking his son. That is not a mistake anyone survives. The words should have chilled Mia. Instead, she found comfort in the older woman's certainty, in the absolute faith that Marco would do whatever necessary to eliminate this threat. At 2:47 a.m., her phone finally rang. Marco's name lit the screen, and Mia answered with shaking hands. Tell me. It's done. His voice was rough with exhaustion and something darker she chose not to examine too closely. The Rossi leadership is dead, or in federal custody, their operations dismantled, and evidence has been delivered to authorities that will keep the survivors imprisoned for decades. No one will threaten our family again. Relief flooded through her so powerfully that Mia actually swayed. You're safe? You're coming back? I'm safe. And yes, I'm coming home to you, both of you. A pause, then, softer. Ti amo, Mia. More than words can express. I love you too, she whispered, aware of Elena's knowing smile in the periphery. Hurry home. The sun was rising when Marco's convoy returned, golden light painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of amber and rose. Mia met him at the door, cataloging the exhaustion in his features, the new shadows in his eyes, the blood on his clothes that he'd tried unsuccessfully to clean. She didn't ask about details. Instead, she took his hand and led him upstairs to where Luca still slept, the boy's face peaceful in innocence. They stood together in the doorway, watching their son, Mia realized, the possessive pronoun, feeling right dream of worlds without danger. We did this, Marco murmured, his arm wrapping around Mia's waist. We protected him. Together, Mia agreed, leaning into his embrace. That's how we'll do everything from now on. No more separation between your world and his world. We're one family, now, figuring out how to build something better. Marco turned her to face him, his eyes bright with emotion despite the exhaustion lining his features. Marry me, he said simply. Not someday, not eventually. Marry me because I can't imagine facing another day without knowing you're permanently mine. Because Luca needs you, and I need you, and this family isn't complete without you. The proposal was characteristically direct, lacking flowers or romantic settings but containing everything that mattered: honesty, need, and love stripped of pretense. Mia didn't hesitate. Yes, she breathed, then louder. Yes, I'll marry you. His kiss tasted of relief and promise, sealing their future with the kind of certainty usually reserved for vows. When they finally broke apart, Luca stood in his doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Are you getting married? He asked with a child's directness, hope dawning across his features. Does that mean Miss Mia will be my mama? Mia knelt to his level, her heart impossibly full. If you want me to be, I know I can't replace your first mama. You're my second mama, Luca interrupted, the distinction important to him. My first mama is in heaven, but she sent me you because she knew Papa and I needed someone to love us. His 7-year-old logic was flawless and heartbreaking in its simple faith. Then yes, Mia confirmed, pulling him into her arms. I'm your second mama, and I will love you forever. Marco joined their embrace, the three of them forming a circle of protection and love in the morning light. Outside, the world continued its dangerous dance. But inside this moment, they had everything that mattered: safety, commitment, and a family forged from loss into something unbreakable. Epilogue. 1 year later, Christmas lights twinkled throughout the Lincoln Park mansion, reflecting off ornaments that told the story of their blended family. Luca's handmade decorations hung beside elegant Italian glass, his paper, snowflakes as precious as any heirloom. The boy himself sat at the piano Elena had taught him to play, picking out Silent Night with careful concentration, while their guests mingled with champagne and laughter. Mia stood beside the Christmas tree, her hand resting unconsciously on the small swell of her belly, 4 months pregnant with a daughter they'd already named Sophia. After the woman whose loss had somehow led to their family's creation, Marco's arm wrapped around her waist, his hand covering hers, their wedding rings catching the light. "Happy?" he murmured against her hair, the question one he asked frequently, as if needing constant confirmation that their joy was real and lasting. "Impossibly so," Mia confirmed, leaning into his embrace. "Though I'm going to have to stop tutoring soon. The other students' parents are starting to notice my food baby." She'd continued tutoring even after the wedding, working part-time while finishing her degree online. The flexibility allowed her to be present for Luca while maintaining her own identity, a balance Marco supported despite his willingness to provide everything financially. "You're an excellent teacher," Marco observed, pride evident in his voice. "Our daughter is lucky to have you as her mother." Their daughter. The phrase still filled Mia with wonder that she was building a family with this complicated, brilliant, dangerous man who transformed his entire world to give his children a better future. The Santoro organization existed now only on paper, a legitimate business empire built from the ashes of his father's criminal legacy. Luca finished his song to enthusiastic applause, his face glowing with confidence that would have been unimaginable a year ago. He spotted them by the tree and rushed over, launching himself at Marco with the unconscious trust of a child who knew he'd be caught. "Did you hear me, Papa? Did you see? Mamma Mia?" His nickname for her combined her name with the Italian word for mother, a linguistic bridge between his two mothers that felt perfect. "You were wonderful, Tesoro," Mia confirmed, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Your first mama would be so proud of you." Luca's expression grew thoughtful, the way it did when he considered big concepts. "I think she is proud," he said seriously. "I think she's happy I have you now, that Papa's not sad anymore, and that I'm getting a baby sister." His hand rested on Mia's belly with gentle reverence. "She sent you to us because love multiplies instead of dividing. That's what Elena says." The wisdom of children, channeled through their housekeeper's Italian philosophy, made Mia's eyes well with tears. "Elena is very wise," she managed, pulling Luca into a hug that Marco joined, their small family unit complete and perfect in its imperfection. Later that night, after guests departed, and Luca finally succumbed to exhaustion, Mia and Marco stood in their bedroom, the master suite she'd officially moved into. After the wedding, though she'd been sleeping there long before the ceremony. "Do you ever regret it?" Marco asked suddenly, voicing a fear he'd never quite conquered. "Choosing this life, this family, with all the complications we carry?" Mia turned from the window where she'd been watching snow fall across the garden, moving into his embrace with the ease of practice and love. "Not for a single second," she said firmly. "You gave me a family when I didn't know I was lonely. You gave me purpose beyond just surviving. You gave me Luca, and you're giving me Sophia. And you give me yourself every single day, all your complexity and contradiction and fierce love. You gave me hope," Marco countered, his hands framing her face with reverent gentleness. "You walked into our disaster of a life, and somehow made us believe we could be better, do better, become the family we needed to be. You saved us, Mia. Both of us." "We saved each other," she corrected, the truth more complicated and more beautiful than simple rescue. "That's what families do. They show up for each other, they fight for each other, and they build something stronger together than any of them could create alone." Marco kissed her then, soft and deep and filled with promise not just for tonight, but for all the nights stretching ahead. When they finally broke apart, his hand rested on her belly where their daughter grew, protected by love that had survived danger and loss to emerge transformed. "Thank you," he whispered, "for seeing past my reputation to the man underneath, for loving my son like he's yours, for giving me a future I didn't think I deserved." "You deserve everything, Marco Santoro," Mia assured him, meaning every word. "And I'm going to spend the rest of our lives proving it to you." Outside, snow continued falling on Chicago, covering the city in pristine white that made everything look new. Inside the mansion on Lincoln Park, a family slept, father, mother, and son, with a daughter on, the way bound together not by blood or obligation, but by choice and love, and the fierce determination to protect what they'd built from the ashes of loss. In the morning, Luca would bound into their room, demanding Christmas cookies for breakfast. Marco would pretend to consider it, before Elena overruled them all with actual nutrition. Mia would sit at the table, surrounded by laughter and love, and feel the baby kick as if Sophia was already eager to join their chaotic, beautiful family. But for now, wrapped in each other's arms, Marco and Mia simply held on to each other, to the peace they'd fought so hard to achieve, and to the absolute certainty that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. A broke college student had answered a tutoring ad. A single father had hired her to help his grieving son. And somehow, impossibly, they'd built a family that transformed them all. Their family, built from loss and transformed by love, would stand forever. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.